Morning, everybody. Jeff from Rust Bucket Valley Garage. Wanted to give you a little update on the 2002 Chevy S10 and how we're coming on this one. The original thing was, if you've seen the previous couple of videos, was that it had a hard miss in the engine, and we were able to take and drive it from where we picked it up to back to home. Okay, and we did some testing on it, and we determined that cylinder number 2 did not have any compression, and we pulled the cylinder head off of that, and we determined that the number 2 exhaust valve was hanging open. So we went yesterday and we picked up the reconditioned cylinder head, and they put it in some cleaning material. It's called cold tanking versus hot tank. Hot tank is for cast iron, where they use manifolds and engine blocks and cylinder heads and stuff like that are made of some kind of ferrous alloy, which means it has steel or cast iron in it, and it eats all the junk off there, and it would take and clean it up. Well, this is an aluminum head. If they put an aluminum head in the hot tank, it would dissolve it and eat a bunch of holes in it. Okay, so they use a chemical stripper that takes all the stuff off the outside of it. Also, what they do is they go on the bottom here and they fly cut it flat. Okay, which is very important for your gasket sealant. So this is number 2 right here, and all the valves are seated down in there. To check and see what kind of valve job you got with the spark plugs in here, you can take and pour a little bit of oil or a little bit of gasoline and see whether it leaks down rather quickly. If it does, you got one of the valves that's open, and it needs more work on it, but this is all nice and shiny and flat and everything. Okay, so we're starting to take and reassemble the cylinder head. This is some kind of port that they have. It's got 2 exhaust channels on it. It's something for the admission system, but we went ahead and removed that cover, put a new gasket on it. We got a brand new gasket set. When they take and do a valve job, there's some valve stem seals that go underneath all of the valves, so you have to supply the machine shop with those, and they install them, when they reassemble everything. What we're currently doing is we're putting the spark plugs in. Okay, so we have 3 of them in, and I wanted to show you the last one. When you use brand new spark plugs, you want to make sure that the gap is set properly. And before you install the spark plugs into the head, you want to take just a little bit of anti-seize, and we have some on a cotton tip applicator, and we just put a little bit on the threads, and it makes it easier to go in. They go in really smooth, and they torque down the way they should. So, it makes it easier to get out when it comes maintenance time and you have to take and remove the plugs. Okay, a little tech tip right there. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to be replacing the gaskets, both for the throttle body and for the intake manifold to the head interface. And we're going to go ahead and assemble the intake manifold onto the cylinder head. That's the way we took it off. It's easier to do that because you have access to all the bolts right here. It's really, really easy. There's kind of a close fit between the wheel well and spring tower, and also where you can take and get a wrench in there so you can take and pull the bolts out for this. So there's 8 bolts holding it in. So if you do it when it's on the bench, it makes it a lot easier. Okay, also wanted to take and update you on a couple of other things. We got the interior back together This bezel here that goes through around the instrument cluster and around the air conditioning, you know, climate control and the radio and everything, it had this bar cut out of here because this is a 1.5 DIN. Okay, and DIN is the number of spaces that it takes, is 1 DIN, 2 DIN. They put an oversized radio in there, like this one right here. So this one's going in my my little parts store. If I ever need it for anything, probably wind up selling it on Facebook Marketplace for 20 bucks or something. But what I did is I went to Factory Radio, and they have a presence on the internet, and went ahead and got a radio from them and went ahead and put it in. And since I had the engine all disassembled, I had the battery disconnected, so I put the battery back on, and I wanted to check the operation of the radio, make sure everything was all right, everything's perfect. Okay, then I reinstalled this right here and this right here, and also the headlight switches. Okay, and then you put those little metal clips on the back of the bezel, and you go ahead and you line those up and you gently put that in. There's probably 8 screws holding it in for the panels underneath here, so you got to take those out, and there's also one right here. Okay, so the inside is complete. However, you will notice that there was a hole in the floor where the transmission should be. And that is a brand new story. And let me show you what's going on with that. So as you can see underneath here, the transmission is out. And the reason the transmission is out is something I will tell you in just 1 second. So when we brought the vehicle in, we noticed that there was a whine coming from the transmission. It's a very familiar sound that we've heard before, and generally it's not the transmission itself. It is a device called a throw-out bearing. Okay, and what the throw-out bearing does is it presses against the clutch to disengage it when you take and put your foot on the clutch pedal. Okay, however, in this case, we were kind of suspicious because there's been a lot of work done on this truck, and by mechanics that maybe didn't know entirely what they were doing. The reason I say that is because there were bolts missing all over the place, and also on the right side of the transmission there is a ground cable that comes by, and that was damaged, and when we pulled it off it came apart. So we're going to have to take and go under there later on today, and we're going to have to take and repair the wire. However, we took and thought this right here is the clutch assembly. This is a slave assembly right here, that one of these is a bleeder valve. The other one is the feed from the clutch master cylinder, and then a master cylinder for the clutch, which is different from the brake master cylinder. It has its own supply and reservoir, and when you push on the clutch pedal, it makes this go out. Okay, generally it is this bearing right here that makes a bunch of noise. Okay, and we thought that this bearing right here was bad. It's a little bit beat up, but it's in okay shape. It seems to take and run smooth. Okay, however, okay, the front of the transmission has a shaft on it, and it has a turn down area, and this right here is called a pilot bearing. Okay, this pilot bearing is pressed into the back of the crankshaft. This is made of bronze. Okay, so when I say this bearing keeps the shaft that comes out of the front of the transmission from flopping around when it's running through the clutch. Okay, and you'll see the clutch here has like teeth on the inside of it, and that goes to the input shaft of the transmission. This is a clutch disc. This underneath it here is the pressure plate, okay, and this actually presses on the back of that, okay, to release this, okay. This right here is actually supposed to be pressed into the back of the crankshaft, and I stuck my finger in it and pulled it out, and it was very, very loose in there. It was very loose on the input shaft for the transmission, and this right here was the problem. Okay, so we went to Napa. We figured, well, since we're here, we might as well go ahead and put a new clutch in it, and we'll get a new pilot bearing and clutch disc, pressure plate. And unfortunately, this right here is sold as an assembly, okay, and this assembly right here is about $130. So where you could take and get just this for about $30, okay, they want to take and sell you the whole assembly. So that's the only way that we could get it. Unfortunately, we couldn't just get the bearing. Okay, so that's what the rattle was from the transmission. It was the pilot bearing. Anyway, we're going to take and pick up the rest of these parts right here, probably this afternoon. So tomorrow morning, we're going to go back together with the transmission. And in the meantime, we are going to be working on the cylinder head. We'll go ahead and put the last spark plug in, and then we'll go ahead and change the gaskets on the intake manifold and get that ready to go. And then it's easier for us to take and reinstall the transmission when the cylinder head is not on the engine, since we have it on there, because there are two 18mm bolts that are on the top of the transmission bell housing that are extremely difficult to get out. Unfortunately, somebody went to town on these with an impact wrench, and they were torqued to about 180 foot-pounds, which is way, way above what they should be. And we had a devil of a time getting it out, but we got them out. So it involved special wrenches that we have in the shop here for difficult situations, and cheater pipes and all that kind of stuff. So we finally got them. But anyway, I hope I get bringing you some good information today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And please stay tuned for our next update when we start getting things back together. Okay? I hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you next time.